As you already mentioned, the sandwich tactic is already known that it doesn't work. I mean, there's so many articles, if you just Google it, why not to use the sandwich methodology. And I think we can now talk about the sandwich methodology, but I don't think that actually helps our listeners, because what is more important is like what does actually work.
What's up, and welcome everybody to Digitalog. Digitalog is meant to be a dialogue about digital topics like digital work, digital products, and all the topics that we are passionate about. And speaking of we are DPM, which is an abbreviation for Die Produktmacher, a digital company based in Munich. But for simplicity reasons, let's just stick to DPM, as probably non-native German speakers would struggle with Die Produktmacher. So what we want to talk about today is feedback and feedback culture. And therefore, I have Lucy with me, and I'm happy that you're back after your maternity leave. And especially I'm happy that you're back because you can be here today with me.
Hi, everyone. Thanks.
So Lucy is one of our product managers at DPM, just that you know. And my first question and how we want to tackle the topic today is, can you explain what you think feedback culture means?
Well, so feedback culture to me is like an umbrella, and it has like very specific parts to it. But the gist of feedback culture means that you create a safe environment where people can actually give and also receive feedback that they don't take personally in a way that it is offensive, but actually it helps us all to improve and actually at the end of the day create a better quality and create a better work environment for us all.
I mean, you kind of touched also why it's important already, like to like improve ourselves, to like have honest feedback exchange on a like productive level, but not on an emotional or personal level.
Right.
I mean, the thing is that I feel is important when it comes to like a living feedback culture is trust.
Right, because trust is the foundation for a feedback culture. If you think about maybe feedback that is for the person who gives the feedback uncomfortable because you want to point out specific things that you have seen. I mean, in the end, feedback is not the truth. It's just your perspective on the behavior or the work of another person. So if you think about feedback that might be negative in some sort of sense, it is more than important that you actually already know that the person who gives the feedback only gives that feedback because the person cares about you. He cares personally. He wants you to improve, to get better. He wants everyone to work better together. And that's the reason for the feedback. And it's not because the person doesn't care about you, hates you, wants you to be sad. That's not the point. It is way more about actually improving. And I think that's the very hard part in the end, because feedback is when it's done right, most of the time uncomfortable, because you really dive into specific areas that maybe also the person already knows that is not perfect or can be improved. And to point those things out is actually a skill that you have to learn and you have to also improve.
Yeah, it's like a muscle. You have to practice.
Right. Yeah, completely right.
Yeah. So I think trust is the one thing, but also empathy is very important, just to like think about how could the other person perceive the feedback that I'm giving. Mm-hmm. So especially those two things I feel is really differentiated between giving bad feedback, not negative, but really bad feedback, compared to good feedback, because also some sort of negative feedback can be transported in a good way just to make the other person better.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to ask yourself what you want to achieve or what's the result of giving the feedback. And the result should always be to help the other person or help like the team to get to a next level of quality or to like just improve. And that should be your driver, and it shouldn't be about like, oh, I have a one-on-one, I need to give that person feedback, what could I possibly think of. That's not the point. And if you think about our values at DPM, we also always state that it's very important to be yourself, and that also brings us to a feedback culture where people are very different. And that's what you also already referred to with empathy. You have to always put yourself into the shoes of the other person and think about like, maybe where are they coming from? There must be a reason also why that person may behave that way or did things the specific way they did it. And it's really not about pointing out that there is a truth and you know it better. It's way more about just mirroring the person and just show them, hey, I've seen you, I realize what you do, and we can work together on maybe improving that way if it's not already great. On the other hand, it's also about pointing out what you probably did well or where you really did well.
Yeah, I mean, it's as old as the hills, right? So it's all about context.
Correct. Yeah.
You cannot just see one specific fact, if it was good or bad, and then like isolate that thing and give the feedback. Okay, you've done that bad. So that's not the way it works.
Right.
And I think you already mentioned some of the values that we live at DPM, and I think this is something that really creates an environment where a feedback culture can really be lived. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. That's why, at least me personally, I really enjoy to be here, because every day I have the feeling that all the colleagues and all the stuff here really wants to like get me in a better position and to like reach a higher level of quality, but also in personal involvement.
Yeah, totally. And it's really hard for a company to get to that stage, because you can't just order or you can't just dictate to be trustworthy. Like you can't, I mean, you can write that on your company website, but like, is that really so? And you can only actually experience that when you're already part of that company and part of that team. And it's hard work to just keep up that environment, especially in like days where we have solely Zoom meetings and we can't really meet in person. It's even more important that we are all aware that we want to create that environment and we live by our values. So that's hard work. And I do think that it's much easier to just say that you care about feedback and you have like a positive feedback environment, but actually having that implemented and really live by your team members is a completely different story.
And it has to be lived by the entire organization, right? So it doesn't work if it's only on a certain level of like employers, but it has to come from the top to the bottom, even if you have low hierarchies. Everybody has to understand the value of giving good feedback. And giving good feedback is like, it's a science itself, right? So we all probably heard about the sandwich feedback. Say something good, then say what you actually wanted to say, then say something good again. But this is not the best practice. So maybe you can like give us a short glimpse on what are other methodologies or frameworks, and also maybe the things that we apply here at DPM coming to a good feedback culture.
Sure. As you already mentioned, the sandwich tactic is already known that it doesn't work. I mean, there's so many articles, if you just Google it, why not to use the sandwich methodology. And I think we can now talk about the sandwich methodology, but I don't think that actually helps our listeners, because what is more important is like what does actually work. And what we found out here at DPM is that there's more than one tool and one way to give feedback. And we and I don't know if maybe our listeners also know about Kim Scott. She wrote that book about radical candor, and it's basically a book about how how important feedback is and how you should give feedback, and basically how you as a company can create a feedback culture. And she describes it very well in a way that it is important that you personally care about the person that you give feedback to. And also what is very important is the time scale. So you don't wait until your next official meeting with that person, but actually you give the feedback right away. And then there are more things to it, obviously, where there are do's and don'ts. You shouldn't give feedback to a person when there are like a lot of other people in the room, because that maybe puts the person into like a place where the person feels uncomfortable. So there are different ways sort of how to learn how to give feedback. And we at DPM, I think what we try to do is we take those best practices and we try to apply them in a way that fits to us and that it makes sense to us, because there's actually no good reason to just take one of these methodologies and just damn them onto our culture. So
that's why I think it's valuable to see these things as principles rather than rules. Because you just can't apply any of those rules and then it will be the holy grail of feedback culture. I think that's not working as well, because every single company, every single organization is different and has to like adapt these principles to what works for them well or for them best. And I think this is the trickiest part, how actually to establish the feedback culture in your very individual environment.
Yeah. And what helps us is that we base it off of our values, as you already said. And one of them is like better together. And it just creates that underlying understanding for why feedback is important. And that is something that helps us where we already know why we're doing it, and knowing why it is important gives it a good sort of standard. And on top of that, we do actually teach ourselves and our newbies what we mean with feedback and how to give feedback. And even as an employee working for DPM for a couple of years, you do get a refresher, because it is important that you always get to the point where you refresh your thoughts on feedback, and you just also try to implement that in your schedule, as in like you have one-on-ones, you have performance reviews, you have all those official meetings where we already know that feedback is part of it. And what we try to do is like consciously just create more awareness around. It's not just like an item on your agenda. It's actually something that you need to prepare for. It's something that you should be very conscious about and think about what you actually want to say to the person, and also what you want to receive.
So at the end, you could say that a living feedback culture must be lived.
That's a very great summary. And it's the hardest part of it. Yeah. You have to live it. You have to really understand it and also implement it in a way that comes naturally.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really great discussion, and it's just, I think, the basement of this topic. There can be even more topics to discuss, and maybe there are coming more.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening already. This episode now comes to an end. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for participating. I enjoyed this discussion a lot. So thank you for listening. And don't forget, we want to have feedback from your side as well, as we want to get better all the time. So please let us know if you think that this was a valuable digital log for you. And if you have any feedback that we should consider, just use all the different functionalities to let us know. Maybe put it in the comments or write us a message. That's also fine. And if you liked this episode, don't forget to like, or you can either share. And if it's as it is also available as a podcast at the end, then rate us an Apple Podcast or Apple Music with the 5-star rating. That would be awesome. And all the thing I can say at the end is hopefully we see us in the next episode. And thank you very much for listening or watching. See you.